In progress, and has been instrumental in organising today's event. So before we introduce today's special guest, I'd like to invite Steph to begin with an acknowledgement of country, please. Steph, over to you.
Thanks, Andy. I'd like to acknowledge and pay respect to the Tasmanian Aboriginal community as the traditional and ongoing owners and custodians of the skies, land and waterways of Lutruwita, Tasmania. I pay my respects to the Palawa people on whose lands I stand today and to their elders both past and present. I also express my gratitude that we share this land today, my sorrow for some of the costs of that sharing, and my hope and belief that we move to a place of equity, justice and partnership together.
Thanks, Steph. So I'd now like to briefly introduce our guest presenter for today, Associate Professor Yuan Yi Lo from the Literacy and Language Unit of the Faculty of Education at the University of Hong Kong. So Yuan Yi received her doctorate from the University of Oxford, and her research interests include bilingual education, medium of instruction policy, and classroom interaction. And today, Dr. Yuan Yi will be talking to us about assessment for bilingual learners and teacher assessment literacy. So thank you very much for joining us today, Yuan Yi, and I'd like to hand over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind invitation, Andy. And also thank you all for joining this session. I know it's towards the end of the working day for you, but then, yes, thank you for your time. So let me share my screen so that you can see my points, my PowerPoints, and yes, what I'm going to share. Now, the topic for today's sharing would be assessment for bilingual learners and teachers assessment literacy. I would say that two are closely linked to each other, and these four major sections of my talk is actually the development of my research trajectory. So at the beginning, I'll just briefly introduce or problematize assessment for bilingual learners, especially in my context, like what we call EMI or CLIL. And then I will present some research findings on the current practices of assessment and the potential impact on bilingual learners. And that will speak to the importance of teachers' assessment literacy, which we propose a conceptual framework for, and we are now developing an inventory or like a questionnaire to capture that important aspect of teachers' professional knowledge. So this is how I arrange today's talk. First of all, I would like to briefly introduce or unpack the complexity or the issues of assessment for bilingual learners. I would like to define the research context a little bit so that you can see how the findings, how the research I'm going to share may connect or may be applied to your own context. I'm sure we are all aware of the spread of educational programs or approaches where students are actually learning non-language content subjects through their additional language, their L2. So these programs can come under the name of English medium instruction, content and language integrated learning, content-based education or content-based instruction, immersion programs, etc. But then, so of course, these programs are implemented in different socio-linguistic or political contexts with different characteristics of teachers and students. But then the major characteristic remains that students are learning the content subjects through their additional language. And in this sense, it's a bit similar to the context, maybe to your context, where you have what researchers may call English as additional language learners or English language learners in the mainstream school, because they are also learning content subjects through their additional language, a language that they are still acquiring and maybe they are less proficient in. Now, then coming back to the key issues, that is assessment. Now, in assessment and testing literature, there are some key concepts or key elements to make assessment effective. So the first one is validity. Now, I'm giving a very brief definition of validity is whether the test score can accurately reflect a student's level of knowledge, skills, or competencies, that is, which the test is intended to measure. In other words, validity is whether we are testing what we want to test. And if this concept is applied to assessment in bilingual education programs, then is about whether we can measure what we want, what we target at, and whether assessment can reasonably reflect students' actual learning. So this may look straightforward, but later on, I will show you it's not that it's more complicated. It's not that straightforward. And another issue is fairness. So teachers should ensure that all students or no students, bilingual students, are not disadvantaged because of the language of instruction and assessment. So this, as I said, these issues raise some concerns for bilingual learners in CLIL or in EMI setting. The reasons can be, this may be due to two reasons. First, is about the relationship, the close relationship between language and content learning, or language and learning. So in most assessment, actually language is still the major medium of expression. So students are asked to express their content knowledge through language, the medium of language. And if students are doing so through the less proficient L2, then very likely we are underestimating their content knowledge. They may not be able to express their content knowledge, their understanding, and also their higher order thinking skills in the less proficient language. In this sense, the assessment may not be valid, and it may not be fair because we are not allowing the students to demonstrate their actual content knowledge. And then the second reason that may lead to the complexity of assessment in these programs is teachers' belief and practices in assessment. Now, if we want to have effective assessment, then it has to align with what we aim at and also what we teach. So that is the alignment between assessment, between learning objectives, instruction, and assessment. But then in CLIL, in EMI, there's always the question, what are we testing? Are we testing content? Are we testing language? So in most of these programs, content subject teachers are the one who design this assessment because usually, especially EMI, is more content oriented. So when they design the assessment, they don't think they are assessing language. They think that they are just focusing on content. But then when they are marking students' script or students' answers, it seems that they are affected, or their marking is mediated by students' language proficiency. So for example, they will justify why they give this student a high score based on the language proficiency, because their English is better, so I give a higher score. In this sense, they are not just assessing content, but also language. If that's the case, is the assessment valid? Because we may not aim at assessing content, but then we are actually doing so. And finally, many teachers have expressed reported that they received insufficient training or professional development related to the assessment issue. So that's why that's the complexity, or there are some issues when it comes to assessing bilingual learners in CLIL or in EMI in this kind of bilingual education programs. So these issues actually motivated me to investigate this issue, this aspect of bilingual education, and I would like to address these fundamental questions. That is, what to assess. For example, are we assessing content, language, or actually both? And how can we assess them? And what's the impact of the way that we are assessing students on their performance? Are they being disadvantaged? Are they assessed in a fair way? So that's why in this session, I'm going to present the findings of some research. Hopefully, I can address some of these questions. Now, in an earlier study, we tried to analyze or survey the current assessment practices in the EMI secondary schools in Hong Kong. So my research is mainly focusing on the school setting, especially secondary school. Now, we analyze different types of assessment, including the what we call formative assessment, that is students' homework, students' textbook, and we also try to analyze the high-stake examination, that is the public examination papers in science, in biology, in Hong Kong. So we actually analyze around 4,500 questions. Each question is either one question, one standalone question, or one part of a multi-part question, because the demands would be different according to the parts. And we try to establish a satisfactory iterator reliability. Now, when we I said analyzed, how do we do so? We actually use this framework when we try to analyze the linguistic and cognitive demand of the questions. So we want to see what we are assessing students. On the cognitive demand dimension, you can see we have 3 levels. Basically, we want to have a 3x3 matrix so that it's easier. But of course, we all know that from Bloom's taxonomy, there are like 6 levels. But then we try to make them, we try to simplify them to make it easier to do the analysis. So recall, application, analysis, they represent like low, medium level, and higher level, higher order thinking skills. And then for the linguistic demand, we kind of separate them into receptive and productive demand, because sometimes it can be very different. So for receptive, that means what they need to read so that they can understand the question. And productive linguistic demand means what they need to do, what they need to write in terms of language, in language. Or sometimes there can be no productive linguistic demand. For example, when they answer multiple choice questions, they just need to tick the answer. So there's no productive linguistic demand. So I'm going to show you some examples. For this one, this is a very typical diagram labeling question in biology and also in other subjects. So if we analyze this question with our framework, then it will be somewhere here. That is, we are asking students to recall the name of these different organs. They just need to read very simple language. Basically, they don't need to read anything. They just need to read this ABCD and mainly the graph, and then they need to write the vocabulary. That's why it's productive vocabulary. So for this kind of MC questions, if you know something about science, and if you look at this, students are asked to read. They need to read the sentences and the options to understand the questions. But then the nature of these questions, we believe, is more like a recall of information. And then there's no productive demand because they just need to take the answer, circle the answer. So that's why it's like a combination of these skills. And then if for this kind of scenario-based question, which is also common for science and other subjects, then actually students are required to apply what they have learned. For example, this one is Newton's law of motion, and then they need to apply it to a new scenario. Now, for this case, they need to read the sentences to understand the scenario, and then they also need to write some sentences to complete the sentence. So that's why it's a combination of these skills. So we use this framework to analyze all the questions we have collected. And then the major findings is like this. After analyzing all these questions, when we are comparing the junior level textbook with the senior level textbook, that is the different grade levels, we'll find that there are significantly more questions requiring application and analysis, that is higher order thinking skills, and also productive linguistic demand, that is they have to write sentences and text when they proceed to the senior secondary. So there's a jump, there's a progression or jump in both cognitive and linguistic demand. And if we are comparing the more formative assessment, that is textbook and workbook questions, with the high-stake public examination questions, then there are more questions requiring the top level, high order thinking skills, analysis, and also text production. So in the public examination, the questions are more linguistically and cognitively demanding. Now, Then with these findings, we start to ask these questions. Bilingual learners, that is like our students in CLIO, in EMI, are they well prepared for both cognitive and linguistic demand of the assessment questions? And are they disadvantaged, especially if the questions require high productive linguistic demand? So they need to write text, they need to write sentences. So are they prepared and are they disadvantaged in this sense? So especially to address this question, that is, are they disadvantaged? We conducted another study. In this study, we are not just analyzing the demands of the question. We are actually analyzing students' performance in the public examination against the different levels of cognitive and linguistic demand. So to do so, we hope that we can review, we can see the potential mediating impact of the language of testing on students' performance. So for this, we collected the results of a stratified sample, random sample of students taking the biology exam in Hong Kong, the high stakes examination in Hong Kong. And we have we have half students from CMI, that is Chinese as the medium of instruction. They're using their L1. And then another half are EMI students, that is they are using their additional language to learn and to complete the assessment. Now, we perform statistical analysis to see the impact, the potential impact of the different types of questions on their performance. Here are the major findings. Now, in public examinations, and I guess in school-based examination, usually there are different types of questions. So in the public examination, one paper just has MC questions, multiple choice questions. So for this group of questions, when the cognitive demands increased, CMI students' performance dropped significantly, but not the EMI students. That means the EMI students' performance was quite consistent across the different cognitive demands. For MC questions, if you remember, there's no productive linguistic demand. So they don't need to write anything. They just need to circle the answer and read the questions. Now, when it comes to structured questions, that is when the productive linguistic demand comes in, so students need to write something to answer the question. So for this type of questions, both CMI and EMI students' performance dropped significantly when answering this type of questions with increasing cognitive demands. But then the declining trend, like the negative impact, is more obvious for EMI students. So it seems that if we compare the results of structured questions and MC questions, it seems that the productive linguistic demand has more impact on the EMI students than their counterparts learning the subject in L1. Now, we further conducted regression analysis to see which one is the strongest predictors for the students' performance. And for CMI students, the cognitive demands of the questions best predicted their performance. But for EMI students, it's the productive linguistic demand of the question that best predicted their performance. So the conclusion seems to be like this. EMI students' academic performance, especially in high-stakes examination, that's what we analyze, seems to be mediated or negatively affected by linguistic demand, and the negative impact is more significant than their counterparts learning through their first language. So in this sense, we are kind of addressing the question that they seem to be disadvantaged if they are taking the examination in their L2. But then I guess recently, or not recent, I guess we also know that a question is not just about linguistic demand and cognitive demand, because when we were analyzing the questions, we actually find a lot of pictures, a lot of multimodal elements. That's what we call multimodal element. It's just not just about language, but also other modes of meaning making. That's why we further expanded our focus. It's not just on language, but also on multimodal resources. So we want to see whether multilingual and multimodal resources play any role in existing assessment practices in CLIO or in EMI. apart from the meaning making mode, actually researchers in CLIL or in EMI assess, especially in assessment, because they can see the potential language barrier. They actually advocate for multimodal assessment because that may help students to overcome the language barriers. So we really want to see the existing practices in assessment to see whether that's the case. Now, again, it's like a question analysis in this study, and we focus on public examination papers this time. We are still analyzing the textbook, but that's about instruction, so it's slightly different. So that's why up to now, I have preliminary findings regarding the examination questions in the public examination. So we analyze biology and geography. We want to see if there are any differences in different disciplines. And again, the unit of analysis is one question or one part of the question, and we try to establish inter-rater reliability. Now, the framework we use for this analysis is actually based on what I showed you. So we still have the cognitive and linguistic demand, but then we want to incorporate the multilingual element. So we will see, when we analyze the linguistic demand, we will see whether there's other like languages involved. Usually it would be students L1. So whether students will see any L1 in the question, for example, glossary, I don't know, or some quick translation of the words, and productively whether they are allowed or they are expected to use their L1. And then we extend this framework to cover the multimodal dimension. So we see whether the question has any multimodal elements. If it's yes, then we want to see what types of multimodal elements. For example, whether it's symbols, it's photographs, naturalistic drawing, flowchart, etc. And it's the same for productive. So whether students are asked to express their meaning in other modes. For example, they are asked to do calculation, they are asked to draw, etc. So we try to extend this framework to the multimodal dimension. And then if there are multimodal or multilingual elements, we'll go to stage 2, that is to see the relationship between the multimodal elements with the text and also the affordance of these multimodal elements, whether they can facilitate comprehension or facilitate meaning making. So we are having this 2-stage analytical framework. Then I'm going to show you the results, the key findings, which I think is quite interesting. Now, for the multilingual elements, so whether students read any other languages or whether they are expected to use other languages, then it's actually absent. There's no there's no L1 or other language elements, both receptively and productively. Yes, I guess it's mainly because it's a high-stake public examination. So translanguaging or the use of other languages would be kind of discouraged. And then the second major finding is that productively, students are not really awarely asked to express their meaning with multimodal resources. For example, there's just 1% in biology and 1% in biology and geography, of questions where students are asked to draw something, to sketch on the graph, or to do calculation. So among the 1,000 questions that we analyzed, actually this is a very low percentage. So yes, in other words, most of the questions still expect students to express their meaning with some kind of writing. So there's the linguistic demand instead of other modes of meaning making. But then in terms of receptive multimodal elements, that is what they can see. The multimodal elements that they can see in the question, actually there are the proportion of questions including multimodal element is quite high, around 60% for biology and over 75% for geography. So most of the questions in these subjects include some multimodal elements to construct the scenario, so to ask the students the questions. If we further distribute or further analyze the distribution of these multimodal elements according to the cognitive and linguistic demand of the questions, we can see that around 30, so this is in biology, around 30%, I've highlighted here, around 30% of the questions with multimodal elements also have around 20%, so around 20% of these questions with multimodal elements have relatively high cognitive demand and also linguistic demand. So they are asked to write sentences and to produce text. Okay. And for geography, the trend is even more obvious. So around 33% of the questions with multimodal elements actually ask students to produce text and require higher order thinking skills. So in this sense, geography may be more, even more linguistically demanding, and the use of the multimodal elements may help to construct the scenario to prompt students to demonstrate their higher order thinking skills in the format of text. If we look at the relationship between the multimodal elements with the text, then we find that in assessment questions, actually the majority of the questions, the majority of the multimodal elements in the questions perform the elaboration function. What does it mean? It means that the elements represent the information in the text and further add more information so that students need this information to answer the question. So I'm going to show you some examples, but then if the majority of the multimodal elements perform this function, sometimes, so we start to think maybe they actually add additional demand on the students in terms of comprehension. That means they're not just reading the text, but then they also need to read extra information from the multimodal elements. So we are going to show you this. This is if we further analyze the types of the multimodal elements involved, and we find that different types of visuals or different types of multimodal elements are common, are typical for different subjects actually. If it's biology, then you can see a micrograph like this, and you can also see some stylus drawing like this. So students actually need to be familiar with the subdiscipline specific multimodal elements to understand the question. And then for geography, I think it makes sense to have more maps, tables, photos, etc. Usually showing them some landform features, and then they need to explain these landform features. But then one thing that we also see, one trend is that a lot of the visual elements are actually hybrid. That means they include different features, the features of different types of multimodal elements, and sometimes these elements are combined in the same diagram, in the same figure. So it may be difficult for students to interpret. I'm going to show you two examples. Now, this one is what we call intra-source hybridity. So the question designer actually combined the flowchart and also stylus drawing to create this figure. So when students need to answer the question, students need to understand how to interpret or how to read this diagram. And in geography, this is quite common for geography. In geography, they also have hybrid kind of multimodal resources, but the hybridity is inter-source. That is, they are given multiple pictures, multiple graphs, and they need to combine all the information gathered from these different sources in order to answer the questions. So we believe these different types of hybridity actually impose extra cognitive demand on the students. In other words, students really need to have the what we call the multimodal literacy. So apart from language, like the literacy, the traditional literacy, they also need to have multimodal literacy in order to perform well or to succeed in assessment. Now, so far, what I have shared, what I have shown you about our research on assessment show that bilingual students' performance seems to be mediated by the use of their less proficient L2, and then the discipline-specific use of multimodal resources may impose extra cognitive demands on the bilingual students. So the implications for teachers would be are we aware of these demands, and are we prepared to help the students to tackle all these demands? And in this sense, we believe more professional development support for teachers, especially the content subject teachers who are teaching these students, would be necessary, especially in terms of their assessment literacy. So that's why I'm moving to like the recent projects I'm working on move towards teachers' assessment literacy and their professional development. Based on our understanding of the literature and also our understanding of the nature of CLIL and CLIL teachers, and with reference to some other work on assessment literacy of teachers in other disciplines, we have come up with this conceptual framework for assessment literacy for CLIL teachers. So we also conducted like scoping literature review and also interviews with teachers and teacher educators and come up with this. So so you can see the different parts. The core part or the maybe the underlying part would be the teachers' conceptions, especially their views of teaching and learning. What does CLIL mean to them, or how do they think students learn, and then how they will assess the students, and also their understanding of some principles and values of assessment. For example, like issues like fairness, validity, etc. Then apart from this, we are also then apart from this conceptions or like cognition, then we are also having different aspects of knowledge related to assessment. So we have assessment of knowledge of assessment dimensions, that is what to assess, the content of assessment, knowledge of assessment purposes, that is why to assess, and the knowledge of assessment strategies, that is how to assess, and knowledge of assessment interpretation and action taking, that is so what, after assessment, how to follow up. Now, these knowledge of assessment, this knowledge of assessment in different dimensions actually may be shaped by teachers' conceptions of teaching and learning, and also the principles of assessment. And then whether they can apply or they can translate this knowledge to the real classroom assessment practices will be mediated by some contextual factors. For example, the geographical context, like the educational policies, their school policies, their students, characteristics, etc. So that's why we come up with this framework to outline the different components of assessment literacy. And these may also speak to the needs to support. If we want to support or enhance teachers' assessment literacy, especially in CLIL, so what kinds of knowledge do they need, and how can we do something to enhance these kind of knowledge? Now, we believe this conceptual framework can be used to analyze the assessment literacy of teachers, CLIL teachers, EMI teachers, and factors affecting such literacy. And also we can compare the assessment literacy or the characteristics of teachers in different contexts. And for teachers themselves, they can also use it as a diagnostic tool for their needs, for their existing assessment literacy level, and to see what areas they would need to further enhance their assessment literacy. So that's why, so I've highlighted assessment like a diagnostic tool here, because after conceptualizing the components of assessment literacy, the next step that we are doing is to develop this tool so that teachers can use it to diagnose or to analyze their existing literacy level, and then areas that they need further support. So with the remaining 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to talk about the progress of this infantry development and also our preliminary findings. Now, so as assessment literacy is, in general, it can be defined as the knowledge and skills of assessment and how teachers apply this knowledge and skills to measure and to support students' learning. Now, quizzes or like instruments to measure teachers' assessment literacy are not new. There are previous attempts starting from 1990s. But then usually these kind of questionnaires or tests, they are in the form of a quiz with different questions, and then there's usually one correct answer. So after teachers fill out the whole questionnaire, then they will have a score. So how many score they get out of like a total of 30 or something. Now this is one question extracted from one of the teacher assessment literacy questionnaire. Maybe I give you 1 minute to see if you can get the correct answer. So it's about reliability, increase the reliability of a multiple choice exam. So you see that there's also some scenario, Mrs. Locus, and then the test is a multiple choice end of unit examination. So how can we increase the reliability? Then there's actually some knowledge involved in the concept of reliability, right? So I'll give you 10 more seconds. Okay. Now, the answer, I believe, should be C, add more items that like those already in the test, because for reliability is about consistency. So if we want to increase the reliability, we should increase the number of items, right? Now, this type of questionnaire can still give us or capture teachers' knowledge in different aspects. For example, reliability, fairness, or validity. But then it may not be able to capture the different practices, or because they just have the right or wrong answers and also a certain score, certain level. So teachers may actually have different perspectives. They may have different practices. So we want to capture these. And so that's why recent teachers assessment literacy questionnaire or inventory would adopt like a scenario-based approach. So the different options, so there's no right or wrong answer. Instead, there are different scenarios representing different approaches to assessment. For example, assessment for learning, assessment as learning, assessment of learning. And then the teachers are asked how likely they would choose that particular option or that particular choice. So it can reflect teachers' multiple perspectives or multiple practices or their orientation to a particular approach. It may be just like a comparison, right? So they may favor more assessment for learning, but it doesn't mean that they don't like assessment as learning at all. So it's just it's just like a comparison, is a relative like level, right? So that's why this is the approaches to classroom assessment. And our inventory actually follow the more recent approach that is scenario based, and also it can be used as a diagnostic tool, because with the different perspectives, different approaches, then the teachers can see their orientation, which one they prefer more, and then maybe the other areas they may also give some more attention. Now, I'm going to introduce our inventory. So this is the framework that we base on when we develop the items in our inventory. So you can see basically they follow our conceptual framework for assessment literacy: assessment purposes, assessment dimension, assessment strategies or assessment process, and then assessment interpretation. That is why, what, how, and then so what. The follow-up action. And we have one additional dimension, assessment fairness. So it taps into the central part, that is teachers' conceptions. There are some principles of assessment. So in each domain, there would be some themes. For example, under assessment purposes, usually it will be assessment of learning, for learning, as learning. And we modify the description so that we can incorporate the characteristics of content and language integrated learning, the CLIL or the EMI context. So for the assessment dimension, we have content-oriented, language-oriented, and content-language integration or balance. So when we design the questions or the items, then we will write according to these themes. And then we try to see which one teachers prefer more. Then that would show their approaches to assessment. So with this framework, the overall design of the inventory consists of 3 parts. The first part is approaches to assessment. We have 4 scenarios, and each scenario has 15 statements. So basically, it's 3 from each dimension. That's why 15 for each scenario, so that we can have some reliability for each domain and then each subdomain. And part 2, we are also interested in the mediating factor. If you remember the framework, we have the knowledge and then we have the mediating factor. So we also want to capture this, and we have 13 statements depending on the different factors. More macro level like government's policy, the meso level like the school policy, the school context, and more micro and personal level, for example, their personal beliefs and their professional training. And then the final part is more on the confidence, their self-reported confidence in assessment. So again, the 18 statements correspond to the 5 dimensions in the framework. So they are asked to indicate their confidence or their skill in these different aspects. So I just want to show you part of these different sections. So this is the first part. Section 1 is about their approaches to assessment. So the teachers will read the scenario, and then there would be 15 statements follow, and they asked to state their likelihood to these different statements. So for example, this is about they are teaching in EMI or CLIL context, and you are planning a new unit. As a teacher in this context, your priority would be to blah 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 blah. So then each statement will correspond. For example, number 1 is corresponding to assessment of learning. This is assessment for learning, and this is assessment as learning. So the statements are designed like this. But then for the 4 scenarios, then the scenarios are different, and the items are also slightly different. But then they are targeting at the dimensions, at the theme. This is part 2. Is about the influence of the contextual factors. So we have macro level, we have meso level, and we have micro level and personal level. All right. And then for part 3 is about the confidence in different aspects. For example, whether they have clear purpose for their tasks, whether they can inform their instruction. So these are also aligning with the different themes and dimensions of the framework. And then they are asked to rate whether they are novice, beginner, or they are expert in these different aspects. All right. Okay. So when after we have drafted the initial assessment, the initial inventory items, we have to validate the whole inventory. So the first step is we invited experts, including both researchers and practitioners, that is experienced teachers, to review the items for us. But because our inventory is quite long, so we ask different participants to review different parts. Otherwise, it's very, very long. So we invite them to rate the alignment between each item and the corresponding theme on a 5-point scale. So whether they closely align or they do not align at all. And if for any items have a rating below 4, then the experts are asked to give some suggestions or to explain why they give a lower score. And then we calculate the content validity index for each item after gathering all the score from the reviewers. And then for those items with CVI below 0.8, then we will revise the items based on the review panel suggestions. And for those items, we send them back to review, and until they are satisfied, they are happy with the items. And then stage 2, which is still ongoing, is to test with teachers. That is the target participants or the users of this tool. And our target is 200 teachers, so that we can have factor analysis and also the scale reliability check to ensure that they are reliable, they are valid. Now, at this moment, we have just collected 50 responses. So we still have some way to go to get them more responses. But I just want to show you some preliminary findings in the last 2 minutes. So you can see this is the part one, the first part, approaches to assessment. That is which approaches they report or they prefer to use. I've highlighted some interesting figures, maybe interesting numbers. So for the assessment purpose, actually, most teachers preferred, or they are more oriented to assessment for learning. And this actually align or correspond to assessment interpretation, because they are also using the data to inform their teaching. That's what assessment for learning is about. So comparatively speaking, they would less prefer, they less prefer or less oriented to assessment of learning, assessment as learning. But still, you can see it's around 4. So they are not discarding them, but then they just prefer assessment for learning more. So that's I think that's the advantages of using scenario-based approach. Instead of just one particular answer, we can see the comparative choices or orientation of the teachers. Now, for assessment dimension, that is what to assess. Still, teachers, because most of them are content subject teachers, they are still oriented to content. They want to assess content, but then some of them still recognize the integration of content and language. And for assessment processes, they focus more on the design of the assessment, but then they may pay less attention to accommodating students' needs and also designing the assessment rubric. So that's the use of scoring and accommodation. And for fairness, most of them adopt like the standardized approach. That is, they have the same assessment for everyone, regardless of their background or their language proficiency level. But then, and they paid less attention, or they didn't pay a lot of attention to differentiation, which is more personalized design, assessment design for students with diverse needs. And then for the factors that affect their assessment practices or the preference to assessment, to different types of assessment, you can see the macro level, that is mainly about the government policies, the curriculum guides, and also the examination. So in the macro level, we also put down examination, high stakes examination, because we collect data mainly from Hong Kong, the mainland. So maybe these contexts are still quite examination oriented. So their practices are affected by those factors. And their confidence, we can see they are slightly less confident in assessment processes, and especially the differentiation one, and also fairness issue. So they don't know, they are less confident in tackling the fairness issue. Now, these are still preliminary results, but then from these results, we can see, for example, some areas, we can infer some potential areas where we need to provide teachers with more support. For example, they may need more support in designing assessment strategies that allow students to demonstrate content and language learning in different ways, in diverse ways. That is some like different modes of assessment, different formats of assessment. They may also need support in designing assessment rubrics that can reflect students' content and language learning, and they may also need support to design assessment that can accommodate individual students' needs. All right, so this, yes, I will stop here. And if you happen to be a CLIL teacher, or CLIL teacher, please help us spread this assessment literacy infantry, because as I said, we need 200 participants, but then we are still we still have some way to go. Thank you very much. And any questions, comments are welcome. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you very much, Yuan Yi. Sorry, I was muted there. Does anyone have any questions for Yuan Yi?
I've got a question.
Thanks, Nadia.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much, Yuan Yi. Sorry.
It's okay.
I'm having trouble getting it out today. I was really interested in the fact that the teachers were more interested in assessment for learning than assessment as learning, and what might be the reasons around that. Did you unpack any of that in your findings?
Right. Yes, we are also a bit surprised because as I said, in Hong Kong, we are quite examination oriented. So our expectation is that they may prefer, or they may be more oriented to assessment as assessment of learning. But then I don't know. Yes, I don't have the definite answer for that. But then I guess these days we are all talking about assessment for learning, and teachers are highly aware of this concept. And in our statement of the different scenarios, actually we if the items targeting assessment for learning, they talk about I would like to collect data to inform my teaching and also to inform students' learning. I think those items sound good, sound reasonable for teachers, and then they may choose, they may rate those items quite high. So that's why maybe that may explain the results, why this is the most preferred approach. But it also aligned, as I said, it also aligned with the assessment interpretation. So I think teachers are really buying into the concept that for assessment, we have to make good use of the assessment data to inform teaching and learning. I think that's good trend to see. I would say for teacher educators, that's an encouraging trend instead of just focusing on assessment of learning.
Yeah. I wonder if it is also potentially an indication that they're not understanding the differences between those three purposes of assessment. Maybe, yeah.
Right, but then the statements related to these these different types of assessment are quite. I think we don't know. We don't use the specific term assessment for learning, assessment as learning. We just present them in plain language. So I guess they are choosing the one that they buy in or they prefer. So I think that's good to see.
Yeah, that's cool. Sorry, and I forgot to say, thank you so much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. It's been very interesting. Thank you.
I hope this resonates with your context, because I know different contexts have different characteristics, different features, and I hope that you will get some ideas or some insights. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. It's been great. Thanks.
Yeah. Robin, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the same preliminary findings, part 3, where you talk about confidence. And I'm wondering, so how did you get the confidence? Did you ask them to just use a Likert scale or something, very confident? And how confident are you, and is that in that as an instrument, asking people how confident they are? Because they look very confident there.
Yes. So it's here. Let me show you the example sentence. Yes, they are quite confident. Yes. So it's on a Likert scale of 5.
I saw this. I didn't. Yep.
Yeah. So so we give them these statements like this. And then we try to make these aligned with the different dimensions, assessment purposes, assessment dimensions, and yes, they are. Yes, if we consider 5 as expert, they are quite confident in most of the categories. But then let me see. So comparatively speaking, they are less confident, but they are confident because number 4 represents competent, right? 5 is expert. So they, comparatively speaking, they are less confident in assessment process, that is the different strategies, and also fairness issue. So to accommodate students' needs or to accommodate students' language proficiency. So I think they're slightly less confident in this area. So maybe, of course, as we ask teachers to self-report, to self-rate, right? So it's comparatively speaking, they may need more support in these two areas. So maybe for teacher educators, we can do more in these two aspects. Thank you.
Sorry, can I add to that?
Yeah, please.
So I'm wondering too then whether the fairness issue is associated with the low scores in the other part on differentiation. And, you know, that might be something to explore a little bit further as well.
Yes, definitely. So here, differentiation, so for part one, approaches to assessment, they also tend to pay less attention to differentiation. So this is actually part of the fairness bit. So it's to differentiate according to students' diverse needs and also their language proficiency. So I think this is I think this also aligns with what we observe, what we observe in our CLIO research, CLIO assessment research. So teachers, I think in terms of fairness, so the ideas of fairness is I have to do the same for all the students, regardless of their proficiency level or their special educational needs. So that's their concept of fairness. But then if we ask them to have maybe some accommodation considering students' language proficiency, which is very relevant for CLIO, then they have this worry that if I give them some accommodation or if I do something, I design another question like a paper that may be different from others, then they will have this worry that maybe parents would complain, maybe the schools will not support because it relates to students' results. So I think that may be their worry, their concerns when it comes to fairness issue.
Yeah. I guess that's tied very much to the focus on high stakes assessment rather than
that's true. That's true. And in our project with teachers, like our collaboration with teachers, we also try to encourage them to have some, maybe if they want to focus more on language, we actually encourage them to have maybe some language bonus mark, so that the students can pay more attention to the language, and that can kind of assess students' language. But the content subject teachers are quite hesitant in doing this because they believe then it will not be the same, or it will affect especially if they have the same paper for using like the Chinese, the students L1, then the two versions will not be the same, and then they are worried about that. So so it's this kind of tricky issue, contextual issue that we still need to tackle.
Yeah. I think sorry, I won't take up too much more of your time, but I think that the multimodal approaches might help with that. So even though in your research they created more cognitive demand, if they were taught as part of formative assessment and used more widely, you know, throughout classroom practice and then in those exams, it would benefit not just the students who have English as a second language, but all of the students, because it would act as a formative assessment in the high stakes test. So, I think that might be something to look at.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a very good point, actually. That's why we are interested in exploring multimodal assessment. And that's why some other researchers also promote multilingual and also multimodal assessment. Multilingual may be a bit difficult to achieve, especially at high-stake examination. But I think multimodal, because multimodal or multimodality is actually very common in different disciplines. As we showed you, it's actually very common. It's part of their discipline literacy. So, but then how we can make use, in some cases, how we can make use of the multimodal elements to help students overcome the potential language barrier. Maybe teachers need to be more aware of that instead of like adding extra, making the questions even more difficult for the students. Then I think we can actually work with teachers in that area. I think that would be very interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of a way to differentiate and you know, maybe reflects universal design for learning to a certain extent as well. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks.
thank you. So we have a question in the chat box. Teachers, yes. Yes, share with us more about the way you generate a program. Yeah, for part 2, let me see. So the scenarios are for part 1. For part 2, it's basically the statements. Yes, for part 2 is mainly about the statements. These are the statements, these are the factors affecting their assessment practices, and they are asked to, the teachers are asked to what extent these are important important factors affecting their assessment practices. But then for the scenarios in part 1, the 4 scenarios, we actually base the scenarios on DeLuca 2016, this one. This reference, let me show you this reference. So we actually base our scenario on the original scenarios in this infantry, but then we kind of modified them based on the CLIO, the special characteristics of CLIO. Yes, CLIO and the EMI context, because our focus is more on the balance between content and language, or like how the teachers juggle with the two. Yes, when we are having the two in the same program. Yes, but then we design this, and I have to say it's not easy to design those scenarios, because even if we have something to refer to, but then it's still quite context specific, and their scenarios may not be highly applicable to us. For example, I remember one scenario is about I think one scenario that we eventually give up is about communicating the result with the parent or something like that. But then in Hong Kong, we seldom like communicate the result, like the test result, or how we design the test with parents. It's usually through like report card, but I don't know, maybe this is more common in the author's original context. So yes, to put it short, we design the scenarios, we modify the scenarios from the previous literature, but then we have to pay special attention to the nature of the CLIO program and also the context, I would say. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Yuan. There was a previous question above that from Loan in the chat.
Yeah. Yes, let me see. Okay. Right. Okay. No, we didn't really set the score. We don't really want to, or let me put it this way, we don't have the standard yet. We don't really, we won't say, oh, if you achieve 4 or 5, then you have a high level of assessment literacy. We don't want to follow the previous attempts, like the early attempts of giving the teachers a score. Oh, that's your level of assessment literacy. Instead, we would like to, maybe it would be interesting to compare, just like this. It would be interesting to compare maybe the teachers' approaches to assessment in different contexts. Say in Hong Kong, maybe we are more oriented to assessment for learning, but then maybe in other contexts, they may put more attention of assessment of learning or assessment as learning. Then we can see the interesting differences between different contexts, and maybe the factors behind, the factors affecting such differences. So I won't say yes, like a minimum score, or how can we classify teachers or categorize teachers. But then as I said, we would rather like to see it as a diagnostic tool to see the needs for professional development or for further support for the teachers. So if, for example, like accommodation or the design of rubrics, so we see they may need more support, then maybe for teacher educators, then we can provide more support in those areas. And of course, for this one, assessment dimension, from the CLIL perspective, we really want them to put attention to both content and language. But then we understand, because they are content subject teachers, they put more emphasis on content. So we understand the situation. So we may see how we can encourage them to pay slightly more attention to language. But still, I think it's okay on the scale. Instead of like 3 or 2, then yeah, we can still see some attention in this area. So yes, I hope I addressed that question. But then at the moment, we don't have this kind of scale of like expert level or like yeah, and this is not our intention to categorize teachers. Yeah, thank you.
I might just jump in quickly. There's a part of the question at the end there, what if someone does not finish all the questions, which then made me sort of think of, are all the questions mandatory? Do they have to answer every single question?
No. So for these valid responses, so that actually causes us some problem, because we have a lot of responses, but then they haven't finished the whole questionnaire. So we didn't really so for those so it depends on those it depends on the extent, to what extent they finish. So if they complete at least one whole part, then we will still consider their responses to that particular section. But then yes, it's very different. The whole questionnaire, the whole inventory has 90 questions, if I remember correctly. And then because for each scenario there are 15, so just for part 1 there are 60 questions. So some teachers, they just give up. So that's why it's very difficult to collect a lot of responses. But then our incentive is that after they complete the questionnaire, the online questionnaire, the inventory, they will receive an immediate report showing them their results. That is, which approaches they are more oriented to. For example, we will say, oh, it seems that you are adopting your assessment practices is more like assessment for learning. That is to inform teaching and learning, and you are focusing more on content. So we give them the immediate report so that they can really get some feedback, and they understand the approaches and maybe what areas they can further work on, or they can learn more about. So we hope this can be an incentive for more teachers to complete the questionnaire.
Oh, that's great. They get the report afterwards. It's been so interesting. Yeah, I really enjoyed your talk. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
It made me think sort of at the start when you were talking about the language and assessment, even just I've had discussions with colleagues, and it's, you know, for students just in one language, but in terms of assessment rubrics of how we're marking their use of language. And I know a colleague has had instances where the language component has been quite high, and a student has written a really, you know, nicely written assignment, but it's full of waffle, or it doesn't address the content, but they've scored sort of high enough to pass the assignment because of the written, and so she's made it lower. Whereas the flip side can happen where they can have great ideas but they're not expressed well, and then you kind of think, well, hang on, if you can't express ideas well, then how well can you relate them? So there's a real balance between, I think, content and language, even just in first language, and it had me thinking about that. But this bilingual aspect is then on top of it, so it's really interesting.
Yes, I think even for first language, yes, the relationship between content and language is still there, but then it just maybe the complexity, it becomes more complicated when it comes to L2, the additional language. So yes, how we balance the two, and at least what we ask teachers to do, or we prompt teachers to think more about, would be yes, really have the assessment rubrics so that they can stick to the assessment rubrics. If they really want to assess students' language, if language proficiency, or maybe not language proficiency, at least the language will play some part in their performance. If that's part of the consideration, then they should put it in the assessment rubrics so that everyone knows the expectation. And when the teachers are marking students, grading students' output, then they will stick to these clear criteria. Then that would be more consistent, I think, in terms of the content. And even for teachers to give feedback, they can also pay attention to all these criteria, and it would be more useful for students' own reflection or own learning. I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Can I also just maybe share something?
Yes,
Sorry.
yes, please, Nita.
Thanks, you. A very interesting one. Like, it made me reflect on the way I have been teaching and assessing my students. So I'm teaching English literature to EFL students. So it's kind of like related to what you're doing, right? Like, because my students are not first speakers of English. So it's English is a foreign language, but then they have to show their understanding of the literature that they read in English, which is not their first language. So I've been thinking of like, integrating what you said, like multimodal elements into my assessment. And I was thinking like about translanguaging as well, because it's such a hot issue, and this is not a high-stake assessment. So I was thinking that maybe I can incorporate that into my assessment, like just to be fair to them, like, fairness is very important. So what do you think about that? Like, do you have any particular suggestions for my context? Thank you.
Right. Yeah, I think researchers are really encouraging translanguaging, translingual or translanguaged assessment, or what I call multilingual assessment. And especially if it's formative assessment, there would be more room to play around different types of assessment, different strategies of assessment. But it's quite interesting that in a study that we conducted in a university setting, we try translanguaging in both teaching and also assessment. So in the teaching, in the instruction, we deliberately incorporated like translanguaging and also multimodal, like using flowchart, using mind map. And then in the assessment, because assessment has to be aligned with instruction and objectives, right? In the assessment, we also allow students to use other languages, like their first language, to do the assignment. But then it turns out that not every student use this. Not every students use their first language. When we interviewed them, some of them still, it's actually the students who still stick to the monolingual mindset. They don't think it's good to, especially for your subject, maybe English literature, they may think it's a bit weird to use their first language to express their understanding or appreciation of literature. So I don't know, but it's worth trying, experimenting with, and see how students respond to it. And I would say is for the instruction, maybe we also need to provide support to them in terms of translanguaging, and maybe if we are using other modes like I don't know, video taping or like recording. Sometimes there will be some skills required to produce a good video, for example. So we also need to make sure that we support that, and then yes, and then we can collect students' feedback to see why they use translanguage and why they don't use it. I think that would be good to move forward, whether this is really a good alternative to the traditional or more conventional assessment. And we can also compare, so some studies, they try to compare the students' performance on different versions of the assessment. So we are actually trying this with secondary school students. So more traditional, and also one that allows maybe multimodal expression and things like that. Then we'll see which one may be more valid evaluation of their content knowledge. So we can try. Yes. Thank you, Nita.
And if you could refer me to that research that you were just talking about, that'll be great.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just put you an email, and if I have more questions.
Yes. Then thank you. Please.
Thank you.
Any more questions, anyone? No? Yuan Yi, the QR code that you shared for your inventory, are you looking for participants from anywhere, or?
Yes, yes, of
Anyway.
course. That would be great. Yes, yes.
And are there questions in there that where people provide their demographic details? Yeah.
Yes, the first section would be about that. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So if you're interested, please fill that in and maybe share it with other within your network. But then encourage them because they can receive a real-time report. I think that hopefully that can be some incentive. Yeah, thank you, Andy.
Okay, it looks like we've come to the end of our questions.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for an excellent presentation and talk. And although your data was coming from China and Hong Kong, it really does resonate with the context here as well with our English as additional language learners. So very useful.
Thank you.
Great talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you have questions, just send them to me. Any comments, questions, send them to me. And yes, they are very welcome. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed. And thanks for attending, everyone. Cheers.
Yes, thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you
Cheers.
very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. That was
Bye,
so.
Nita.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yes, I'll send you the reference. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.